Welcome to the Rockwell Barbell podcast. This is episode 24. I have Ben Lay with me and Rob Whitley. These are two of my good friends that I train with, and they're both Rockwell guys as well. And Shara Miller's with us behind the computer. But yeah, I wanted to have these guys on because they're also generally going to be mainstays on the podcast, just like Shara. And this is kind of the introduction podcast to let everyone know kind of who they are and why they're going to be on the podcast. And I've also just had really good conversations with both of them over the time of knowing both of those guys. And kind of just had an epiphany a while ago that I was like, oh, well, the things that we talk about and the things that they know individually, I feel like are things that other people could benefit from, and hearing the conversations that we're having, and also just kind of like borrowing from their knowledge and like life experience. And that was my main reason for wanting to be on the podcast. Rob was a great baseball player before he got into powerlifting and martial arts. We can kind of get into that in a little bit. Ben originally came to Rockwell basically through personal training purposes, right in the very beginning.
I submitted the form. You got back to me like an hour later. And that's
I was on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and he still trains with Katie. Has been for how long now? It's probably been it's been over a year or two, right?
No, we're at 3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have a funny story about that.
What's that?
I actually have a funny story about that.
Oh, okay.
So like during the pandemic, we were like doing a lot of biking.
Mm-hmm.
So I had taken a picture of like me on a bike, but like I was wearing a mask at the time.
Yeah.
So I sent the picture to my team, and one of my team members was like, who is that? Why are you sending me a picture of like a random person? I was like, oh, maybe I need to go back to the gym. Like I'm unrecognizable.
Oh no, man.
Like the pandemic hit me so hard, like they didn't even recognize who I was.
So that was that part of the motivation, or that was just like
that was the catalyst.
Oh,
I was just like, okay, I gotta get back into this thing.
That just sent you to Google and
started
the whole process.
Google Maps, like gyms nearest me.
Yeah, and you still train with Katie, you know, and on top of everything else that you do, you know, and you're a friend of Joe's, right? Is that how you ended up at Rockwell originally, through quads, right?
Yeah. I was at world famous quads gym, you know, for from about 14 to 18. I joined Rockwell, and so Joe had moved to Roscoe Village, and he was like, "You got to come to Rockwell. You just got to come." And I was, I had the thing going at quads, and I was resistant at first, but I'd always wanted to check out Rockwell, so he just broke the ice for me. It was really nice to have, a friend to kind of get you in and kind of show you the ropes a little bit. So I always tell Joe I'm like eternally grateful for him that he kind of, took me by the hand and brought me into Rockwell to lift. So
yeah, and I remember when you first came into Rockwell with Joe too, and I didn't know at the time that you're kind of initially kind of a quiet guy. You just kind of keep to yourself.
Yeah.
So you're very nice, but I remember in the back of my head, I was like, I don't know about that guy. I'm gonna see if that guy is gonna be all right or not, or if like he's gonna be able to stay here.
The quiet ones are the ones you have to worry about. Yeah. I have a funny story too. I think I told you this before, probably in the truck on the way to jiu-jitsu, but it was super funny. That was when I joined. It was probably one of my first days, and I think I was lifting with Joe, or maybe it was the first time I came in without Joe. But quads always had good bars and whatever to use. But I think it was the first time I'd actually seen a squat bar in Rockwell. Like a thicker one, the 55.
Yeah, like the comp bar.
Yeah. So the funny story was, it's just a short one, but basically like I went and got a squat bar and started to put it on the bench to use it, and then Matt came over there and was like, "Hey, that's a squat bar. You can't use that there." And he went and took it over to that guy Dan, who was like a huge lifter. Yeah. And it was just funny because I felt embarrassed about it. He was just.
Yeah. So were you going to bench with it?
Yeah, I was going to bench with it.
So you weren't. You didn't know. Yeah, you didn't know that like that was a thing that was there.
Yeah, I just thought it was like a stiff bar that I could bench with. But I think
this looks great.
He's about to do some strongman bench.
Yeah, and I think that day it was particularly busy too, so it was just sort of like a lot going on too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And was Matt nice but also rude?
No, he was always.
No offense, Matt.
He was always nice, super nice, but it was just sort of like, hey, you're not doing the right thing here.
Yeah, no, Matt's really good at being direct.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it can be like seemingly rude, but he's more just trying to tell you what he needs to tell you.
But I figured he wanted to make sure that like Dan had like the proper bar to use for squats, and so it looked like he was getting ready to do some serious.
Shout out to Dan Masenic. Yeah. That dude lives in Ohio now, but he was a member at Rockwell for some time, and that dude would like on the regular be squatting upwards of 750 up to, I think one time I saw him squat 920 in a Titan power cage. I don't even know if that cage is rated for that weight. And the J hooks on that rack are like less, probably like a fingernail.
Yeah, plus it's Titan, so it's
Titan, so it's discount. No offense. But that's a pretty funny story.
Yeah.
And you're also probably like, oh, this is awesome. They have a squat bar.
Yeah. It was an eye-opening kind of thing to come into from quads. That just felt like the place to be. To be honest.
Yeah. We kind of have not a weird back history, but it's just an interesting one with quads. Because like me, you, Mike Wen, James, several other people. I think Kyle Kelly, like other people that are at Rockwell, have kind of a history there, and have good memories. And we still have like a good connection with that gym. I look at them very much like a brother gym, sister gym kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny how in the very beginning when I started the gym, that was the last place that I was training at before Rockwell became a thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was younger then and more immature, and I didn't have as much experience. So when I left there, in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder if that'll be like a competition for Rockwell, Yeah. And now that I say that, it's so hard for me to get the words out of my mouth because, like, it's just so not that. And Dave was always so amazing to all of us. Mm-hmm. And, now looking back on it, I'm like, how silly was that to think that, And also, like, when you're a business, you're your own competition at the end of the day. Like, it doesn't matter.
That's a really nice picture you have of Dave up on the wall. I walked up to it the other day. It's just like how I exactly remembered him just standing at the desk right there with a huge smile on his face. Yeah. So that's a nice tribute you did.
Yeah, we're gonna get a nice little plaque for him and put it right next to my dad's plaque, and kind of in memory of and everything. So
that'd be nice.
Yeah. And the other reason that I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to have you guys on the podcast because you guys are very active individuals, and I feel like your activity levels are probably not the average of like most people. Most people, they do one sport for the most part, and that's a lot for them, which is understandable. But you guys are multifaceted in what you choose to do physically, and also have really serious jobs, and also relationships that you have to take care of and manage too. And so Ben first came to Rockwell primarily as like an Olympic lifter at that point.
Yeah,
right?
That was all I was doing before Rockwell. Before the pandemic, I was doing Olympic weightlifting like 3 or 4 times a week. Yeah, and the average session would be like 2.5 hours. Yeah, and then like that was the only thing that I was doing. Yeah. So when I started at Rockwell, I was working with Katie, but like any free time that I have, I was doing Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, and then there was a period of time where you were doing that and then also focusing on the squat, bench, deadlift. There was kind of a combo of the two for a little while, right?
I was, yeah. So for me, I always gotta have like I didn't have a lot of opportunities like when I was young. So like now that like I have the ways and the means, like I'm always I'm always like looking for like a new thing. Yeah. Like I don't want to be like the world's best at anything, but I want to try everything. Yeah. So like there was like a year where I did competitive paintball, where I would get done with work and I would just like gear up and go to the paintball field.
That's sweet.
There was last year I did a marathon. Yeah. I did a charity marathon, and then Thai boxing. Starting to pick up Thai boxing now. Yeah. I want to get in the ring at like one time. Yeah. Just to say that like I did it. I had a match. Like I want the pictures of like evidence that I did it.
For sure.
Yeah. But I think a big part of that is just like one, like I want to be able to do it and just say like, I can I can do that. And then like 2, like I think having a really stressful job is a big part of it as well. To where like I have a very professional job. I'm sitting on phone calls all working with team members, shooting emails all day long.
Yeah.
So like when it's done, like what I kind of want to do is just sit there and play video games. Like
yeah.
I kind of have to force myself to like be active so I stay healthy.
Yeah. I think you do a good job of that too, and you also do jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
There's some days where it's not a constant thing, but there's some days where I know that you'll be at the Chicago Muay Thai or Chicago Kickboxing Academy on Clybourne.
Chicago Muay Thai Kickboxing.
Chicago Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And there's days where you've trained there, and then you've trained at Balance Point at Rockwell afterwards.
Yeah.
I know that's something that it's obviously not sustainable to be doing every day, but it's commendable when you do it, and it's something that a lot of people, if they do that, they're doing it back to back at the same place. So I think it's really awesome that you'll train there and then ride your bike or Uber to the gym and get back into jiu-jitsu, and Rob, you do the same thing pretty regularly, Now the kickboxing is at Balance Point, you'll do that right into jiu-jitsu, but there's been a lot of days where you'll lift in Rockwell, hit main lifts, like 1 or 2 main lifts, and then you'll do jiu-jitsu afterwards. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's not an everyday thing, but it is somewhat of a commonality, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you do that I feel like it's a couple times a week at least, or a couple times a month at least.
I'm trying to become Superman, like Ed Cohn said, they shoot the bullet at you, and no matter where it hits, it bounces off. But no, I think we talked about this before. It's just sort of like I've gone in phases with it too, and I came from a baseball background, and that's a specialty in and of itself. But then I further specialized, and I was a pitcher, and so that's even more niche, and that's what I did. And I played collegiately for a few years, and I think we were allowed to lift. We did a lot of like Olympic stuff. We did a lot of agility and sprinting and working on small muscles and stuff like that. But that's what really, I think, sparked the flame in me, if you will, to be able to lift heavy, like leaving college. And so that's kind of how I just like, okay, now I can bench press, so they wouldn't let pitchers bench press. So
makes sense.
So, but we've talked about this before too. I still like to go deep into these different things. Like I like going deep into jiu-jitsu. I want to go deeper into Muay Thai and still maintain the lifting. But I think it ties into what Ben was saying, and it sounds like just taking an athlete mentality to it. Yeah. And it's ironic, and I totally understand the validity of, and I've been there before, and I'm currently not there now, but I've been there before, like with baseball and with lifting specifically, of just wanting to only do one thing, go super deep into it, and you have this kind of idea that like if I do something else, that it might take away from my lift that is upcoming. Yeah. But if you reframe your mind a little bit, I found, for example, that one of the times that my squat, for example, was most explosive, I thought, was when I would go out to the field in like Horner Park, and I would do these medicine ball workouts and just throw them around like crazy. Yeah. So I think I reframed the way I think a little bit, and so I too, like Ben, like to just dabble and try to get good into like a multiple types of things, and then think about like how they all connect and benefit each other instead of shutting down basically into one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that obviously there's nothing wrong with just being like, this is the one thing I do, and I'm going to put everything I have towards it. Yeah. Kind of like, just shut out the rest of the world. And I think probably each of us have done that also with certain things. I know I have for lifting, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think also, like you mentioned, reframing your mind is a cool thing to do. And it's an interesting avenue to kind of wander down a little bit. Yeah. And there's obviously a lot of different challenges that pop up with that. Obviously energy is one of them. Yeah. It's like, it's very hard to not allow yourself to just get tired and make that excuse when you feel tired and not do certain things.
Yeah. And I learned a new word the other day. It's not often that comes up, but I learned this new word called WAN, W-A-N. And it's just sort of like Tasha taught me the word. It was pretty funny. She reads a lot. And we hiked a mountain, like speaking of doing different things. And it was fun. And she was like, looked at me and she's like, like, you look really wan. What'd you say? Like, and I looked it up, and it's like an old English word that means like basically like you look so exhausted that you look ill. So I think you're right. It's I think people should like seek out wan. You know, it's an honor to feel tired and stuff. But I do think, in terms of what you said a minute ago, managing the fatigue of doing all these things at once is really hard.
Yeah, and I feel like it's more of a mind game than anything. I don't really. I mean, obviously, there's a reality to it. You know, like, people get tired, and you can't just go as hard as you want all the time and just keep doing that for years and have no issues.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I think it's all about just the demands you place on yourself. And it's funny that you said, like, it's an honorable thing to do. I think it's an honorable thing to do multiple things, you know, well, or at least try to do them well. And every Tuesday I do my lighter bench day, I do overhead work, and I do arms and back. And almost every Tuesday, I would say 98% of the time, I go to jiu-jitsu that night.
Yeah.
And that's a hard day compared to the other days in the week. But I don't go into jiu-jitsu later in the day and say, well, I lifted earlier, so probably not going to do that good tonight. I just try to, like, when I get to the academy to warm up for jiu-jitsu, I sort of close the chapter of that book earlier in the day, and I say, all right, you lifted, that's finished, we're going to put that aside now. Yeah. And now this is about jiu-jitsu, and you've eaten well the rest of the day. Hopefully you've had water, you know, you've had some supplements, you're doing another warm-up. You see me do it before training. I just choose to do a second warm-up. Yeah. It just feels better on my body. And while I'm warming up, part of that is to actually warm up for class physically, but part of that is me just, like, mentally warming up and kind of meditating in my brain while I'm warming up a second time of the day to train a second time. Yeah. Yeah. And when I walk out of the academy and I'm like, man, I did essentially 2 main lifts today and sort of bodybuilding at the end, and then went and did jiu-jitsu. Feel awesome. You know, fall asleep easy that night, but I feel good about what I did that whole day when I'm driving back to the house.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, you have to compartmentalize each of the things because they're all so difficult that it requires that focus. And so now we can sit here and reflect on it and talk about it. But in the moment, you know, it's just like commands your attention, you know?
Yeah. Do you chase that exhaustion? And then do you feel guilty if, like, you've had like too many rest days or maybe days where you're only doing like a 45-minute workout because that's all you have time for?
Yeah. I think subconsciously there's sort of like guilt in that itch to you know, if you for some reason there's a disruption in your consistency to get back in there. And I do think, I don't know if I chase the exhaustion, but I think, like, being tired from putting in the work is definitely, I think, one way to think about it, in terms of you're going to feel really good, you know, after you do this jiu-jitsu session or this, you know, Muay Thai session, and that's something to strive for, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing for me, and I don't think this is the only way I do it, but this is pretty preferable for me if I can accomplish it. But I've noticed that if I can do anywhere from 12 to 15 days of straight training in a row.
It sounds wild.
This totally confirms what I'm about to say. We've also talked about this before too, but go ahead. Wow.
So if I can do anywhere from 12 to 15 days of training in a row, if I need to take a day off for any reason at all, whether I have plans or not, if I just want to take a day to rest physically, or if I want to take a day to spend with Katie, or if I just want to come home and watch a movie and nap, that's the right amount of days for me to not feel bad about not training that day, is about 12 to 15, roughly.
That's... You're like a roughneck out in the field.
So, I'm just being honest. It's no bravado here. It's just that's just what makes me feel good internally as a person.
In my opinion, I don't. This is not meant at all to toot anyone's horn here, but I think, like, us three sitting here, you know, we don't have like the consistency problem. You know, if we're around, if we're here, and you know, we want to put our minds to something and we want to train Muay Thai, lifting, jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, we get ourselves in there, and, you know, we put the time in and stuff. And you know, some people, you know, they will struggle with the consistency thing, but so we face other issues. We face like equally as hard issues of like, how do you balance it all? How do you manage the fatigue, the mental stuff as well, all that in combination with the work. Yeah.
I don't think the work is an issue for me, because I see like this stuff takes my mind off of work, so that way I'm not just like sitting around thinking about the next project and thinking what I have to do next. So I think that's helpful for me, but I do think about it if I'm thinking about like attempting to do a max lift, where it's just like, because there's a risk factor there of getting injured. So if I try to do like a max squat and, you know, I tweak my knee, I bike to the gym, I bike home. Like if I'm lifting with Katie and I'm doing jujitsu afterwards, I'll limp around jujitsu, and then I'll have to like bike home as well. So
what was the shirt that you made for Katie based on a threatening comment that she made to you? Or, well, not a threatening comment, but it was a weird comment.
It was a motivational comment. So this was like me and Katie were going pretty hard, and then she's like, we got to do one more set, and I was like, I can't do one more set. I gotta walk home. Right. This was when I was jogging back and forth to the gym.
Gotcha.
And Katie was like, you can Uber home, and I thought that was great. So I went to the t-shirt deli, and I was like, all right, I need a silhouette of a lady yelling, and I need the words to say, you can Uber home. So I got that shirt for her. I think she cried.
Did she really?
I think she cried.
That is so fitting, though, because she is so aggressive, you know, with things she wants, and especially in training, you know. And she kind of has a reputation in the gym for being like the meanest trainer in the gym. But it's more because she's so strategized and so methodical and calculated and just like on, you know. She doesn't really have off days as a trainer for the most part, you know.
I've definitely had tough sessions with Katie where somebody walks by and I'm like half dead, like sprawling, like trying to catch my breath. And somebody walks by and they're like, "Man, glad that's not me." Or you know,
I hear that on a regular basis.
Glad Katie's not training me tonight. You know?
Yeah. No, that's something that I think is pretty common. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about while you were talking about that shirt is that you know, I think it's changing a lot now, just because a lot of things are changing. And like, you know, when I first started training people, probably 2009 or 10, you know, there was a little bit of a stigma behind dudes training with women, like as their trainer, you know. And it wasn't everyone. I mean, you know, like some people were just always cool, you know. But there was a little bit of a stigma there that I feel like is going away like pretty quickly at this point. But I noticed that especially with like pretty much all of Katie's male clients, you know, that never was an issue to begin with. And everyone always like just seems to really have a lot of respect for her as far as like her skills and knowledge and passion and just like trying to kind of make people better, which is what, you know, should be the important thing to begin with. But I just always noticed that was something that was never an issue at Rockwell. You know, with anyone coming in, but especially Katie, and she just has a good relationship with people like that. And I just thought it was really cool that you guys came in and you're like, okay, like, what do you have for me? You know, and there's never any like, you know, fight or, you know, argument about it, you know, or whatever. And I just thought that was really awesome that, you know, you were just like open to that. And, you know,
I think I have never had a problem with it. I mean, I wrestled in high school. Half the coaches were female.
So, no shit.
So it didn't matter who was telling you to run laps. Like you were running.
You're still running them either way.
Yeah, you were running the laps.
Where was that at?
I wrestled in Houston, Texas.
Oh, gotcha.
I actually wanted to play football, but my mom said no. And you know, now everything we know about like football and concussions, like maybe that was the right call. My mom was like, "No, you're too small to play football." So I was just like, "How about wrestling instead?" She was like, "Okay, fine, you can do wrestling."
I kind of wish your mom would have let you play football because I really don't enjoy that you know wrestling when it comes to jiu-jitsu. I remember the first time we sparred together, I think it might have been a nogi day, or I can't remember. But in the back of my head, I was like, well, this would be kind of nice because like Ben's a little smaller and I'm a little tired today. You know what I mean? So I'm just gonna like smash this dude real quick. And then I remember learning real fast. I was like, don't let him take your back. And he's going to wrestle up your leg if you're not careful. And I remember walking away from that being like pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
You know, and so the wrestling factor is a huge one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, same story with me. I wanted to play football as a kid too, and parents never let me. And I wish I got the chance to wrestle. So yeah.
Yeah, God, I wish I wrestled.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
Wrestling was, I think, no joke, wrestling made me who I am. For better or worse, I think it made me who I am.
For better or worse.
Yeah, because like we talk about like the training that we're doing right now and how it's kind of intense, but like that was nothing compared to like what I was doing when I was like 14 years old.
Yeah.
Like we were running like 5 miles in the Texas heat. And then we would lift, and then and then we would roll the mats out. We would roll the mats out, and then we would wrestle, roll the mats back up, and that we would be doing 3 hours a day, pretty much 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think a good thing with wrestling was that, like, your coach was always pushing you, your teammates were always pushing you, but like there's like it's a true meritocracy. Like the way it works is like there's so many weight classes, and the way that and every week, in order to determine like if you had the varsity spot, anybody else in your weight class could like say, I challenge you for the varsity spot this week.
Dang.
And then everybody would circle the mat.
Yeah.
And it was like a tribal thing where everybody would circle the mat, and it was those two people.
That is super tribal.
And it was just like whoever won represented, the school as the varsity spot. So there was always this like, if I'm not working harder or somebody else is working harder, they're going to take my spot. And even if you're, representing the varsity spot, like for your school, they're the people in your district that, you're going to see later in the year, and you're always going to be working against that. So I think a part of my, like, the training ethic is just, like, that's instilled into me to where, like, I know I can put in the hours. Now, as I'm getting older, like, and as I rack up more injuries, like, I'm learning, like, that's not the case anymore. But, I think that's a big part of me. Is that experience.
Reflecting back on what we were talking about earlier as far as doing multiple things in a day or, doing 3 sports at once or whatever. Yeah. I see that foundation might have been because of stuff like wrestling. Yeah. For you, like, you went to Virginia, right?
I'm from Virginia, from Southern Virginia, and I went to Virginia Tech.
That's what I thought.
School.
Yeah, and that's where you played at, right?
Yeah, I played baseball there. I had a scholarship there for baseball, and but I remember peering in. So I was busy, huffing and puffing from our workouts. The baseball workouts were tough, 5 a.m.s, but I remember, peering in and looking at the wrestling guys, and they were really working hard, and I knew some of them. They were always really interesting guys, and I think, funny story, one of them was like really good in high school. I don't think he was able to pull this off at Tech, and Tech always had a good wrestling team, but someone told me sort of he'd just be sitting up in the stands, like, reading like a novel, or something. They call his name down, and he'd go wrestle and just run through everybody, and then just go back up and sit.
That's so awesome.
And then just keep reading and stuff. Just gigantic guy, and so that's the type of guys that were on the Virginia Tech wrestling team. And I tried to stay friends with them, not enemies.
Yeah, you don't need to be tangling with that kind of shit.
I remember wrestling tournaments where like you get weighed in at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you'd only have like maybe. Like, if you were really good and you were in a popular weight class, you would have like 5 matches. But like, that's like 30 minutes of wrestling. You got to find something else to do. So we found a lot of things to do for the rest of the day. It's got to be very similar with baseball, especially like baseball tournaments where there's a lot of time with
a lot of downtime.
The other guys.
Yeah. I did a lot of that showcase stuff in high school and traveling around across the country. Played for a few scout teams, and you just would go to Florida, you'd go to wherever, and play a tournament, and it'd be a lot of sitting around. I remember I was on a White Sox scout team, and one of the guys on the team was actually like he's a famous actor now. His name is Tyler Hoechlin. I think he played like Teen Wolf or Superman. But I remember just sitting around with those guys and just eating McDonald's and shooting the shit about whatever.
Top tier nutrition going on there.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, earlier today I was training one of my clients, and I had a Dunkin' Donuts Long John sitting on the reverse hyper. And,
the breakfast club, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I eat pretty healthy, and I watch what I eat, and, I'm pretty good about all that stuff. But sometimes I get really busy, and I just have to, like, be a normal human being. And just, and sometimes it's out of convenience. Sometimes it's out of just, the mental side of just, like, it feels good to be a shithead once in a while, And I had that sitting there, and he's like, hey, man, you shouldn't be eating that or whatever. And I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, but I don't drink or do drugs. And he was like, still not acceptable. And I was like, well, I don't care. And he was like, you're really being a kid about this right now. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. I was like, I needed a deadlift today. So I didn't have that, But it made me laugh. And I was thinking about the McDonald's thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And it's not an excuse to just like go off the rails all the time. But, depending on how much activity you have, I think you can afford a couple.
Yeah, you got to give yourself a breather here and there,
Yeah.
I think it just depends on what your goals are. Like, if you have a physique competition coming up.
Well, I don't like the chocolate Long Johns in the cover that it's probably not on the meal plan or the meal prep there.
Yeah. Or if you had a competition coming up where you have to cut weight. But like, I think for most of us, it's just trying to get a little bit better every day, trying to stay healthy and trying to have fun.
Yeah. I just get tired of sweet potatoes sometimes.
Yeah, that's fair as well.
But you guys, I don't know if you ever heard of Booker. You know that name ring a bell at all?
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he's getting ready to move to Knoxville, Tennessee. But right now, until he moves, he's tattooing at Copperplate, which is Caroline's tattoo shop over by the gym. And he nicknamed the sweet potato the Rockwell candy bar for a little while there because I would just microwave it raw and then cut it with a knife that lives between the knee sleeves in one of the cabinets.
That's disgusting. I would advise you. I'm not a medical professional, but I would advise against that.
So if there's ever an intruder at Rockwell and needed a knife, it's underneath the knee sleeve in the microwave room. It's not clean, so the guy will probably not make it. But that always cracked me up that he said that, and it kind of makes me want to throw up. Either because I've had too many sweet potatoes, or just think about that being a candy bars. It sounds like something that would sell at Whole Foods. And the other reason I kind of mentioned earlier that I wanted to have you guys on the podcast is just because conversations we've had in passing, mostly related to like times that we've been driving out to jiu-jitsu or just things we've talked about around training either before or after. And especially with you, like you drove out with me and Rob for one of our stripe tests. That was at Threshold Martial Arts. That was where, I still train there, but that was where me and Ed basically first trained together. That was where I originally brought you out for jiu-jitsu before Balance Point opened. But anyways, we went out there for our stripe test and kind of had a conversation a little bit on the way out, just more about jiu-jitsu and random stuff. But on the way back, we kind of got into some deeper conversation that was, to sum it up, it was basically related to kind of the things that all encompass like your job, Yeah. And so you're technically like, you work in federal regulation on the tech side, or what is the correct way to say that, just so I'm not like...
Yeah. So I work in cybersecurity, and I focus on risk management.
Okay.
So the way to think, I think the easiest way to explain it is that like one of my superpowers is that like I worry about everything. Right?
Okay.
I like you talk to Kathy and she's like, I thought I worried a lot, but like you worry about everything, right? Yeah. And what risk management is basically you're worrying on behalf of the company. You're saying, hey, I think, we should be worried about this, or I think you should be worried about that. Mm-hmm. So I do risk management with a focus on security. So it's helping the company develop like security policies,
mm-hmm.
like this is how we prevent ourselves from getting hacked. This is how we prevent ourselves from like having all of our data leaked out on the internet.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and I remember when we were talking, it was kind of funny because we're in traffic, and so it's at a minimum we're going to be in traffic like on the way back, 20 minutes minimum on an easy day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's more depending. So when we were driving back, I remember we got somewhere past O'Hare and we just got on just some random subjects that I feel like you know about because of things that you do for work, or just your interest on the internet, either or. But anyways, we got about halfway back. And I remember you kept like apologizing. You're like, "Well, sorry if I'm lecturing. Like, I can stop, or like I can be quiet. We can just like change subjects." And me and Rob are like, "No, just keep going on." Like I don't know if I'm actually learning anything because I don't know if I'm smart enough to learn about that. But I was so interested just because I don't hear people talk about those things, and I know you were too. And
I was taking notes.
Whoa.
I had my iPhone down. I was just like trying to type as fast as I could.
Yeah, and that's why I was like. I think Ben's going to be on the podcast if he's willing to be on there, just because eventually I think we can get into some really cool subjects, and I don't think we really have time to dive into that. But all I know is that in that conversation in the car, it just seemed like you were touching on a lot of things that I feel like are probably not your average news topics. They're not the trending news on Google generally, and if they are, it's like we're not really getting into the nitty gritty of it. It's just like that 20-second, little clip that before someone changes, screens and goes to something else. But do you feel like a lot of the information that you were kind of like relaying to us, do you feel like you learn a lot as far as like national or international subjects go because of work, because of those risks that you have to look out for? Like, do you have to like be interested in certain subjects in order to do your job well? I'm just trying to figure out how you know those things. Like, I know I'm kind of making this a little bit of a bummer because we're not going to get into it.
Sure.
No, we just don't have time. But also, like, how do you know about the things that you know about? Is it job related or is it interest related?
I think it's mostly job related, but some of it's like interest related as well.
Yeah.
So like, I used to watch the news and I'd be like, yeah, that's okay, that's cool, but that's not my problem. But when you work on risk management, you watch the news, and you're like, so like. Russia does a lot of hacking. China does a lot of hacking as well. And we know, and to some extent, like we know it's China, we know it's Russia. But, like before I got into security, before I got into risk management, you would watch the news about like, there's a war going on somewhere and you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's happening.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh, Russia's occupied, like Russia's worried, they're going through a war.
Yeah.
How's that going to impact my company, right?
Yeah.
Does that motivate them more to hack my company, or does that motivate them less to hack my company?
Yeah.
If the United States does something and it pisses off Russia, does that motivate them more? So it's I think just working in that space and being a part of teams where some of the people on my team, like their job is to search. For what we call threat intelligence.
Yeah.
So their job is to sit in social media. We hire people that what they do is they infiltrate like private forums of hackers, of what we call threat actors as well. Mm-hmm. And their job is to give us an early warning if we're being targeted or not.
I see.
So part of it is just like being in that job, working with people who are doing this full time. I think that gives you a different perspective of like how you watch the news, how you consume information.
Yeah.
But that also gives you like tips and tricks into like if you want to know more, like this is what you do, like this is how you search, this is where you search, these are the forms. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I think it was really refreshing for us to just hear him kind of unload about certain subjects because. I can speak for myself, at least. I know that like social media is great, right? It's awesome to get on there and just like go down the rabbit hole of whatever's in front of you and just kind of scroll and scroll and scroll, but I feel like it kind of just makes it really about like how you feel, like the stuff you're seeing and what you think about. And it's just like this little bubble in your world. So when you were in the car talking about all those different things with us, it really kind of like opened up my eyes to like, what's going on in the big picture? Like what's going on like across our country, what's going on with Asia, or like you mentioned, Russia. And it was actually just really relieving to like kind of think in those terms because sometimes I really want to get away from this bubble and I want to like try to actually understand what might be happening in general across like a broad, perspective and not just like my phone, Instagram, Twitter, Google News, like all of that. So I think that's really why, I don't know, we just felt like really like, holy shit, like this is what I really would like to know about.
Yeah, we talked about it a little before. I'm not sure at what point it started with tech and social media, but I remember at one point the RSS feed was just really big. So you could really curate all your news articles. I used it for a brief period of time. I think this was like pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, it was just early, and the RSS feed was really big, and you could just like, I want to look at articles from all these different places. So it's just gotten increasingly easy for like the day-to-day average person to curate the information they're getting,
Yeah. I think the big difference there is just like consuming the news versus like being more active and searching out different topics and trying to understand. I think that it'd be the same as like, someone just watching powerlifting versus somebody, watching a powerlifting video, seeing like how's their technique, how can I, is there anything I can learn? That looks cool. Like, I think it's consuming versus like analyzing something, trying to get something out of it. And
it takes way more work.
Digging in deeper,
Yeah, it takes way more work to do that. Like we always talk about watching jiu-jitsu instructionals, or like, YouTube, or even just typing in like jiu-jitsu hashtags, that's like the easiest one.
Yeah.
But we kind of always go back to like John Danaher videos. They're probably the best, the most informative. I would say at least like top 3. But the amount of work it takes to watch a half hour of Danaher instructionals and not fall asleep or get tired or get bored and do something else, it's really challenging, and I think there's like a correlation between that kind of stuff and the news. Like, it's much easier just to read something like, I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's much harder to get on there and be like, I'm going to type in certain things that I think might be relatable to this subject to see what other options there are to like understand the situation rather than just the one thing that I get out of it,
It's got to be the same for pitching as well, right? It's got to be like, there's a certain level of energy and focus needed to just watch a baseball game.
Yeah.
There's a different level of energy and like intensity when you're like, how does he do it? Like, how does he throw in that curveball or,
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things I noticed today is just how big baseball or instructional stuff is on Instagram and YouTube. And it just wasn't like that when I was coming up. You could barely legally, send an email between, yourself and like a recruiting coach. There was like really strict regulations on all this kind of stuff around. But
what kind of like email, like, or like what kind of communication would be restricted or whatever? So there was a point in which your junior year, which is really odd. This is all NCAA rules, but there was like a specific date. I think it may have been like November in your junior year of high school. Before that, you can email and communicate, a little bit. It's track. These are violations. And then there's like a specific date. Then you can talk on the phone from that date forward. So I remember that specific date, like hitting the button on our answering machine. There was just like, hey Rob, it's head coach blah 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 from University of Alabama. How you doing? Love to get you down here. And it was just like, really bizarre. And all that's changed. I think I'm not sure of the specific NCAA regulations, but I mean this ties back to just, I think, the jiu-jitsu stuff and just with the internet and just how people have gotten like a lot better being able to leverage video content and create it and stuff like that. And there is this like very funny thing where there's like some sort of old school I guess like traditions that kind of clash a little bit with some new school I don't know, I guess like conveniences. And so you know how there's like the big thing where like obviously your main source of learning, in my opinion, should be from your professor or your instructor. And then your teammates is probably secondary to that, right? You guys would probably agree with that. Mm-hmm. But then, you have like these instructionals and you have YouTube stuff, and then you have your Instagram feed, stuff like that, which are all really like good, viable sources to learn from, in my opinion. I'm sure that's going to like piss some people off. And, it's like sometimes you bring that into the academy and people see that, like, what are you doing? You're watching a YouTube video and they're like, are you really drilling that off of like Instagram or whatever? I don't really have any qualms with that at all. As long as I know I'm doing those first 2 parts more, that's my mainstay.
Yeah.
But there definitely is a little bit of clash there between the idea of bringing videos like that onto the mat and drilling them with your buddies, and even if it's after class, there's still like a little bit of a stigma behind that, and
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Like I think some people don't care at all, and some instructors probably don't care at all. Others do, others like they maybe get annoyed by it. I don't think they would ever tell someone to stop doing it, but I definitely know that it annoys and bothers some people. And maybe not even instructors either. I'm just saying like jiu-jitsu practitioners could be a white belt, blue belt, purple belt, on up. But it's kind of an interesting thing between technology and then like old school tradition, where they're kind of not fully in line with each other, but they're both great like options, Obviously, I don't think that you can just only do jiu-jitsu based on online things unless you're a phenom, But most of us are not.
Shout out John Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as a white belt, of course, you obviously, you take the precedence over anything I say as a purple belt, of course. But, I felt like, just doing the offline or like, I call it, I guess, studying jiu-jitsu or studying lifting or Muay Thai, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It's just a way to try to progress yourself and advance faster. And you can only, like, I think mat time is reign supreme in learning from your professor and teammates.
Yeah.
But, you can do, there's I think, scientific, validity to the mental reps and
for sure.
and visualization and things like that. So if you can supplement it and really study certain things off the mat, I think it can help a lot.
Yeah,
I think there's a balance there, right? Because like I understand the power dynamic where like you're an instructor and you essentially it used to be like you're the instructor, you were the only source of information, you were the only source of truth.
Yeah.
But like now anybody with an internet connection or a phone is able to look up a Galvo instructional or like a Hodrick ratio. Yeah. So there's like competition in terms of like authority and like information.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so I think there's a balance between, so I think overall it's good for like the jiu-jitsu practitioners.
Yeah.
Right. Because the amount of information available to you is not just limited to how often you can show up to class.
Yeah.
Right. If you have free time, you can look something up to reinforce your knowledge or to learn something new.
Yeah.
But at some point, it's information overload.
Yeah.
You have watched 70 videos on like judo takedowns to apply to Noki, and you've practiced nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you suck at shrimping.
Yeah.
Like you can't escape. Yeah. No. And that was one of the things I was kind of laughing about when I was listening to you is that I do think that there is a good amount of bullying about the online stuff to a degree from like professors or other students, because I don't think that should probably be the majority.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I don't want any bullying as far as that kind of stuff goes. I think I'll take a little bit of shit about that.
Sure.
But it is really helpful, and there's been certain things that I've watched online or that I've, like watched an instructional and tried to apply it the next day at training or drilled it with you and then found it to be really helpful and I'll add it to my game.
Sure.
But like you said, instructor mat time, real mat time is king still, but it's definitely an interesting kind of dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, it is. I think of, I'm sure there's like a lot of white belts who don't approach it right, where they're like, they go to their professor and like, look at this YouTube video that I just saw and like, but Danaher shows it this way, and and then the black belt's just like, it's just like, but I show it this way really well, and they probably don't approach it well. I remember one time in baseball, I had a really good pitching coach that played in the major leagues, and he played for 10 years in the major leagues, right? And I was taking lessons from him, and he was showing me how he threw his changeup.
Yeah,
and I was just like, as just like a young kid, I was just like, well, was that how Greg Maddux throws his? and he was like, he just rolled his eyes like, yep, that's how Greg Maddux throws his.
He's like, I'm not even going to mess. Explain this shit.
So,
Yeah, and, like, one of the things I noticed is that, how long have you been going out to Threshold with me roughly? Has it been 2 years or 3 years? It's been longer than I think.
So I'm about to hit my second year of jiu-jitsu. It'll be like end of December. So I think Late December 2022.
It's been 2 years, huh?
Yeah,
that's crazy. Well, yeah, and going back to like the information side of all of this, you do train a lot. You try to get 4 days, 5 days in. You train. I think you probably train more consistently than most people I know.
Yeah.
You and Ed Rock are definitely up there in the days per week of training.
Feel good getting 4 days in, and lately, although if I go out of town, then I try to make up for it. But when I'm here, I try to streak. Hit those streaks, like you said earlier. You want to train 15, 20 days in a row. I think we've talked about this before, but there's some. No pun intended, threshold where like, you can feel yourself progressing at a certain number of days a week. It's like a simple metric, but it's like, okay, if I get in there 4 days a week, 5 days a week, if I'm hitting 6 days a week, I think I'm going to improve,
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. And I think besides just the training consistency, I know how much time you're spending, on a day-to-day basis or weekly, trying to learn about it, just like we were talking about, on whatever source that is. And it's happening regularly, because you'll send me stuff all the time, or we'll be on the mat and you'll be like, hey, I saw this. What do you think about this? And that's happening almost as consistently as your day-to-day training is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why your progress has been a lot faster than most people. And that's honestly why I was like, well, you've been training like 3 years, right? Because training with you on the mat, it feels about 3 years worth of training, like as far as a training partner goes, an opponent,
Well, I got to give you some props here, just like earlier, like the Joe Levi thing, kind of bringing me into Rockwell and presenting it to me, and how much stronger I've gotten in Rockwell. But it's just been an awesome benefit to have, a purple belt take me under his wing, say, hey, come on out to thresholds, and me being a little bit better now, just realizing kind of like all those days that you sacrificed really of your own training just to sort of like work with me, when I was coming along. And so that's just been a big, even more so than any video, it's just been sort of like having you as a friend to help me. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And I think one of the things that Ed Rock instilled in me really early on, and I mentioned it on one of the other podcasts, but I originally started training doing kickboxing. That was like the large portion of my, first 5 or 6 years of training. And then I got into jiu-jitsu basically because I realized just how bad I was at anything on the ground. And I didn't even like it for a really long time. Yeah. And I just did it purely out of necessity. But one of the things that Ed instilled in me really early on, probably year one of kickboxing, is that, after you start going to the academy pretty regularly, you start to see familiar faces. Like, oh, I train with you. So we know that if we're going to work together, we're probably going to have a really productive training session because you get it like as much as I get it or whatever, right? But when the longer you're at the academy, you'll start to see newer people come in, right? And the person might be older, they might be more deconditioned, out of shape. Maybe their coordination is not good, whatever the case may be. Maybe they're really small. And because of those things, they're probably not the ideal training partner. They also haven't been on the mat as long as you. They're not going 3 days a week or whatever. And one of the things that he said to me, because someone else was kind of complaining in the locker room, I didn't have a good training session today because that person doesn't know how to hold pads, or that person just couldn't keep up or whatever, and they kind of are talking like it's a waste of a session. And I don't think he said it directly, but just like comments he made over the years was basically like, no matter who you're training with, your training should be excellent that day, just because you know how to move with like whatever subject you're working with. Yeah. And so for me personally, I kind of took that on from kickboxing early on, all the way into kickboxing, into jiu-jitsu, all the way to now. And I literally don't care who I train with. Obviously the person has to be able to put forth equal effort, but their skill or like efficiency or experience level literally doesn't matter to me at all. So I appreciate the saying thanks, but I just look at it as like part of training, and people also do that for me for a long time. Like I was that guy to Ed Rock. I was that guy to Professor Bill out at Threshold. And I look at it as like a challenge. Like, how can I take this person that doesn't know how to do anything and try to get them to move decently? And then how do I move really, really well with a subject that's really not cooperating? Yeah. Or doesn't know the drill or doesn't understand the drill or whatever. And so I don't know. I kind of just look at all the training sessions as the same, if I'm...
It's a healthy way to look at it.
Yeah, and it also like you're not being selfish. and I feel like it's really hard to walk into an academy and train, for a lot of reasons. It's scary, you're nervous, you don't know if you're going to be good at it, it's embarrassing, like whatever, you don't want to get hurt. And so if you have someone who's cool like that, who's like willing to offer up their time, and it's not just the instructor, it's like, oh, it's the instructor and I got like 3 or 4 of those people, I'm set.
Yeah.
And then just like Ed pointed out before, I think he said something along the lines of like, he wants people to get better so he can get better, and it sounds like a little cliche. You're like, oh, okay, like, is everyone really going to be an expert like you are? But really, at the end of the day, it's kind of true, because Rob will be coming up on his blue belt at some point, you will too. And, it's just like, it just keeps kind of going through the cycle over and over. And there was one thing too that I was going to mention earlier about like on our drives out to Threshold, and with running the gym, and different life stresses, and also like running Balance Point with Ed. You've caught me on a lot of good days, and then you've caught me on like a couple bad days, and we'll like discuss things on the way out to training, sometimes about business, and your business experience always comes in hand like really, really well on some of those challenging days or on some of those frustrating days. Sometimes you'll just hear me vent, but other times, I'll be like, oh, I'm kind of running into this issue, or I'm kind of running into that. Like, what do you think? And you've always had a really good sort of thought process about those things. And over time, I've learned a little bit about like what you do for work, but never really to the point where we've like kind of gotten into it. Yeah. I've just been benefiting from your like opinion, from your businesses. So what do you do exactly like for work, and like what's kind of your background that has gotten you into what you're in now? I would consider you like an entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of what I call myself, as an entrepreneur. I've just been doing that forever and my whole career, and Ben got to talk about his stuff, and we should definitely trade business cards because I'm a massive risk taker. I've just been doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff since college, and I caught that bug. But basically today, I have a few things going on, but I have like I'm kind of at the intersection of technology and sales. So I have like a sales agency. So we help out like a lot of tech companies with their sales needs. Mm-hmm. Usually it's with sales development reps, or what they're called SDRs or BDRs, and I work on that. But with a colleague, I just launched like another app today, basically that does something also in sales. So that's kind of like my area. But it actually is really fun for me to. I like all things entrepreneurship, and I've had the benefit of just sort of like being a customer, being a friend, and also just sort of getting like an interesting window into, starting up Balance Point, seeing you start up Balance Point, and the day-to-day stuff with Rockwell. So it's just kind of like fun for me to chime in if you'll let me give you anything unsolicited or whatever. But I think entrepreneurship. Everybody's important. All people filling all kinds of roles in the world are important. But I think entrepreneurship makes the world go round. I'm partial to it. I'm biased to it. So that's kind of like a vague answer. But No, I think it's kind of a wild thing. I think being an entrepreneur is really, really stressful and nerve-wracking, but it's worth it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't choose any other life. But it is a rough life day to day, I would say. Yeah. Only because it's just like the massive amount of things that you have to do in a day, morning to night, the hours you pull off, and then a lot of times it's fun, but when things go wrong, like you're the person that, people point their finger at. Yeah. But that responsibility is something like you kind of get used to after a while, but I feel like once you get comfortable with one role, then like the next part of you is like, all right, well, like, how can I do something new that's going to get me back into those beginning stages? And you kind of crave that like risk or that, the muddy waters, like where uncertainty, and then it's kind of funny how that kind of like repeats itself over time. And I think you can probably agree with that, because I know that you've had several things going on at once, Yeah, I think like there's some kind of phrase around like the riskier action is no action, or, like the Michael Jordan quote of like you miss all the shots you don't take. So sometimes people don't realize that like pursuing something they really want to get into is if they're smart, they can do it right, and they can, they can make it work, And but sometimes people, it's okay to like do something on your own for a while, go work for someone else and just take breaks, and it's not have to be all one thing all the time, and so but it's difficult, it's scary at times, and also can be rewarding for sure.
Yeah. So you said you basically work in tech, but also sales. So like, could you give us like a general example of like, what like the average company might utilize you for, or one of your businesses for, like
So also startups, and startups is kind of a loose term. Like sometimes you'll still see like Google refer to themselves as a startup, and most people are just like, wait
a startup.
Wait a second, you're not a startup anymore.
I think they're past starting.
But yeah, like tech startups usually that they don't have to have raised some money. Sometimes they're bootstrapped, but it's sort of like pretty small teams, like company sizes usually under 500, but probably more so under like 200, from like 10 to 200, somewhere in there. They're in this kind of growth mentality, and they want to have some money to spend, and they look for sales as a way to do that. And so that's it can be all across the board with whatever those tech companies do. And so
you'll try to basically help them get better at their sales, or try to figure out what it is that they're selling. Is that essentially what it is? That's kind of what I'm hearing. But
yeah, usually. So now one trend is to not hire in-house for salespeople, or they'll mix and match. They'll do it, but one trend is sort of like to work with a company like mine and just hire an expert to help them like get meetings, like close deals and whatever. And so that it can be more cost effective for them to do that. It can be just sort of fruitful for them to do that versus building a big in-house team.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine too that if you're just starting off, obviously there's a lot of risks for that, and just making it out of those first 2 to 5 years is hard enough alone. Yeah. And then if you have a giant staff on top of that, and you're paying salaries, and you're paying unemployment tax, and you're paying healthcare, and
dealing with potential employee lawsuits.
These startups
risks.
These startups by nature are experimental. They're running tests, and they're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. So it's easier for them to spin up, what we offer than to just to like commit to hiring a bunch of people.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
well, that's cool to know. I found myself just trying to explain to people what it is you do. I'm like, he's just like tech stuff. He's a finance bro. He's like a finance bro. I don't know. He's
crypto
really smart. Crypto bro. He's really into like Dogecoin type of shit. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's really cool to kind of hear it explained, in a way that's like easy to understand. And, and one of the things that we were talking about before the podcast started is just kind of like aging. And I'm 39. How old are you?
I'll be 35 in September.
35. How old are you, Ben?
34.
34. Damn, so I'm the oldest. What are you? How old are you, Shar?
35.
35.
Sorry, brother.
Did you just
I was like, maybe.
34? When are you 35 this year?
November,
Yeah.
Okay.
And it kind of relates to the conversation we had earlier about doing all the shit we do, and none of us are 25, and I don't think you were here yet, but I was telling Ben, I was like, yo, did you hear about the shit that happened to Kevin Hart? And he was like, nah, and he was talking about some other like gossipy news about it or whatever, and he, and he put the camera on his wheelchair. You could tell he's like on the verge of crying, but he doesn't cry, but he's basically saying, I didn't respect my age.
Yeah.
And when I listened to that, I was like, damn, that's like a really interesting way of putting it, because I think you have to respect your age to a degree. But I think also, like, if you respect it too much, then you do nothing. Obviously, I don't think anyone needs to be like tearing their adductor or their abdomen and end up in a wheelchair. Yeah. But, I'm 39, and as crazy as to say, I'm like, damn, man, I'm almost 40. And so every day I have to figure out a way how to kind of like outsmart my body, or how to like, get around certain things, or mentally just do the work in my head to have the willpower to continue training the way I have been training since I was 20, but now I'm almost 40. It's different. It has to be different. So yeah, basically just talking about like defying age and getting older. But you were also talking about like mile markers as far as age goes.
Yeah.
And like sort of certain things you expected yourself to do at a certain point, right? And then like you get older and it's different, like for better or worse.
I remember being younger, and like if my max didn't go up every month, I would get like frustrated.
Yeah.
But like now I'm like, okay, if my max goes up once every 3 months, once every 6 months, like completely cool. Like as long as I'm not regressing,
Yeah.
like I thought that was super cool. And I think like my goals have become like more realistic, because like when I first tried jiu-jitsu, I was 20. Now it's like, yeah, I'll sign up for tournaments. Like eventually I'm going to be like one of the like top whatever in the world,
Yeah.
right? But now I just want to be on the mat. I just want to be like learning,
Yeah.
getting better over time, and like doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Like I still want to do jiu-jitsu tournaments. I would like to have a kickboxing match, you know, at some point. I just want to be able to do cool stuff.
Yeah.
But that's really tempered down from like, you know, I want to be the best at the world at like A, B,
Yeah.
and C at like 25 years old or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? And I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is like dealing with injuries as well, because I would sprain my neck, it would hurt for a week, and then, you know, take some aspirin, I'd be ready to go again.
Yeah.
Versus now, if I sprain my neck, and I was like, man, I got to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
I got to slow down. You know,
Yeah.
I have to tell my training partners in jiu-jitsu, hey, my neck hurts. Like, you know,
Yeah.
please don't clamp down today.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a big change.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, there's been sort of two things that I've dealt with in the last X amount of years, like let's say 2 to 5 years, I guess. And one of them was there was a little while there when I started training jiu-jitsu pretty frequently. For a long time, I was going like 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And then there was a point when I was like, you know what, I'm going to focus on my stripes. I'm going to focus on what these belts mean. And I'm actually going to take this seriously, because I just spent too many years not paying attention to that. My goal was just to go to classes, which is great. But if you're going to continue doing it for a long time, it makes a lot more sense to actually go after, you know, each individual step. So when I decided to actually be more than a white belt and go after a blue belt, or just get into that progression, obviously you have to train more for that. So I started training like 3 days a week, and then sometimes 4 days a week. That frequency changed my body a lot, because I started getting a lot of neck injuries. And at the time I was like, oh, it's just the frequency. It's just because I'm going all the time, my neck's just like getting beat down. But what I actually realized after injuring my neck like 3 or 4 times in 2 years, and these are like real ones where I would go to work for 3 or 4 days, or I wouldn't be able to lift, you know, or I couldn't go to jiu-jitsu for like 2 weeks. Would go to the doctor about it, you know, would go see a PT, like an emergency PT session. And what I actually realized is that the reason I was injuring my neck was because how I was training jiu-jitsu and certain ways that I was moving that was allowing my neck to get injured. And I was basically just doing things in kind of a sacrificial manner in order to make things work, because I wasn't thinking about it. And the reason I didn't think about it is because I didn't injure my neck before, so I didn't have to think about it, you know. But after the third or the fourth one, I was like, okay, is it really worth, you know, lunging towards a person with my head to grab one of their limbs? You know, is it really worth it to scramble in this role? You know, and that actually made me a better jiu-jitsu practitioner, because I had to start looking out for my neck. So I had to start becoming more technical, you know. And part of that, I think, was probably getting older too. You know, like if I was 25, I probably wouldn't be hurting my neck as much, you know. But now that I'm 39, like, you know, I don't think most 39-year-olds in the world are training jiu-jitsu 4 days a week and powerlifting 4 days a week. So you have to get smarter. So I'm kind of thankful for the injury, because it started making me train appropriately, and it started basically making me be more careful. And, you know, I do train 4 days a week and don't really have neck issues right now, you know. Maybe little things here and there, you know, but...
Do you ever see somebody on the mat doing something and think to yourself, that would hurt my neck if I did that thing?
If you saw someone, like, training a certain way?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably most of the stuff I see on Instagram. Like, anytime I see a Darce on Instagram, or... like, yeah, for sure. Or, like, I love 10th Planet shit, just because I think it's really interesting. Like, I don't train at 10th Planet, obviously. But like most of the 10th Planet shit that I see, I'm like, my neck hurts. There's nothing wrong with 10th Planet. It's just I'm a broke ass, dude. But no, yeah, and it's funny. Like speaking of injuries, as far as your frequency goes, with jiu-jitsu and powerlifting, I think you're probably the least injured person that I know.
Yeah.
Which is like an anomaly to me. So
Problem
yeah,
is I'm not pushing myself hard enough.
No, I don't think so, man.
I'll be right back.
You squat
I gotta go. By the way, gotta go.
You squat like a house, and then you'll do jiu-jitsu afterwards, and you're a pretty tough roll in jiu-jitsu. So, but yeah, you just seem like really resilient in that category. Like
I think someone at Quad's gym called me like a masochist before. Sort of like I like pain or whatever, and I don't know. And I've done squat every day programs for like, I don't know what my most is, but probably 30 days or more. And, but I've had knee issues and stuff, and for some reason I just don't. I have stuff that aches and pains. I just don't verbalize it very much.
So you're just quiet about it.
Yeah, I think so. And
he hurts as much as we do.
Yeah,
he just doesn't say anything.
Yeah, and when I'm non-responsive and stuff, just cart me away.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with like Ben. It reminds me of what you said is the kind of tortoise in the hare. Slow and steady wins the race, and I feel like and what you said too. With age, I think comes some wisdom around recovery. And so when I was younger, 10 years ago, like 25, I felt like if I'm not doing something like at this very moment every single day or whatever, then it's a lost opportunity. But you don't really realize that that day off or the light day or whatever it is, that how much it actually is progressing you.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, the fucked up thing is that there's certain days where I'll take a day off, right? Because I felt like I earned it or whatever. And then I'll go and lift the next day. And I just don't feel strong. And I fell out of the groove mentally. And I just maybe I didn't eat as much the day before because I wasn't like nervous about training that night or whatever. Yeah. And there's other days where I'll take the day off and then I'll come in and I'll lift like a machine. And everything feels light. And I just having a good time. And I'm super fired up. So it's just kind of random. Like sometimes those rest days can help you. Sometimes they can hurt you. And it's just funny, like how much, sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental, or a combo of the two. But, and, like as far as the aging thing goes, a lot of the mobility, flexibility, like flossing stuff that I do, sometimes it is just to feel good enough to get on the mat. And sometimes I do feel good and I'll just go through the same protocol anyways. And that's only because I know that I'm going to train tonight and I'm going to have to lift tomorrow. And then I want to train that night or the next day. So I'm just putting the time in almost as if I do feel crappy ahead of time. And it's massive hours a week. I think I probably do an hour of mobility for each day that I lift 4 days a week. And then I probably do 20 to 30 minutes of mobility for each jiu-jitsu class that I take 4 days a week.
That is a lot of time.
It's a shit ton, and it's probably overkill for sure. I think most PTs or most like lifting or jiu-jitsu athletes would be like, dude, But for me personally, it's like I think this allows me to train 4 days a week and lift 4 days a week, so I don't mind putting the time in. Sure. But it's a lot of time. There's certain days where I'm like, where's all your time go, dude? Like, what are you doing all day? And then I add that up, and I'm like, that's why. Yeah. But no, it's worth it for me to do all those things, And you've had a couple of hiccups over the years too, but I've noticed that you generally will still be in the gym, and you generally will still train around it, And Matt Wenning, I know you're kind of a fan of Matt Wenning, and he has a great saying. It's a basically modify, don't miss. Yeah. And it's so simple, but I feel like it's so valuable because he's basically saying, like, of course something's going to be wrong, especially as you get older. But that doesn't mean that you just don't go to the gym that day. And that generally makes it worse. Yeah. If you have elbow tendonitis and you never do a bicep curl for like 2 years, your elbow tendonitis is going to be way worse off than it would have been if you found other ways to use your bicep.
I feel like that's something that changed in our lifetime. Because I remember, like when we were a kid, if somebody got injured, the recovery was like, don't move it, rest. Yeah. let it heal, put it in a cast.
Yep.
But I feel now more and more like if you get injured, the doctors are like, okay, start moving it, start PT right away, start working it out. So I had a couple hiccups where like my neck, I had like a pinched nerve in my neck, and that was bothering me. And so what I attempted to do was keep with my schedule and then add like going to PT as well. And that actually made things worse to where I had to modify even more.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
Take more rest days, Yeah,
and then you eventually had to kind of scale your PT a little bit. Because and I was in the same boat. I hurt my shoulder. It was a combination of doing the build out in the gym.
Yeah.
I never stopped powerlifting during that build out, and I never stopped jiu-jitsu. So using a hammer and a pry bar and a drill and, all those things combined with the sport eventually just kind of made my left rotator just kind of start wearing away, and I had a partial tear for a little while.
Yeah.
And I remember in the very beginning, I almost couldn't do enough PT on it. And the more PT I did, the better it got. Then as it started recovering and got a little bit middle of the road, if I did too much PT work, it actually aggravated it and made it worse. So then I had to start scaling my PT as my strength started progressing again. And now I only use my PT as like warm-ups. I'm not really doing hours of PT a week. And I kind of feel like you sort of went through a similar thing, didn't you, at some point? Because I think your PT was kind of jacking you up after a while, but it was like the saving grace in the beginning, right?
It was like I wanted to attack it, and I was like, I have a problem. This is the solution. So like I'm going to apply as much as the solution as possible. But then over time, I was just like, okay, it's been 6 months of PT. It's not getting better. How about I take a month off of PT and like, what could go wrong? And then as soon as I started giving it more rest, like felt better, and I was just like, okay, maybe it was like a little bit too much. So,
and that can happen, especially if you're kind of an extremist with physical things and getting better and fixing problems. Like you can kind of go over the top with it. And speaking of too, I wanted to kind of give a shout out to Unbroken and Becca at Unbroken because they've kind of become a mainstay in Rockwell. And I go to Becca weekly, whether I'm feeling good or bad. She's been a huge, part of my lifting and jiu-jitsu life. Coming up on maybe a year now. And a lot of people at the gym go to her and have had great results. So if you can look up Unbroken on Instagram or on Google, they're a great resource to go through if you do have any injuries or nagging aches and pains, or if you just have questions about how to maybe move better. From a more technical standpoint, you can get a hold of those guys. I also wanted to give a shout out to Eternal Nutrition. There's a guy named Osi that we train with at Threshold. Really, really good guy, really fun to train with. And he started a supplement company. Actually left his full-time job, and he started a supplement company that is basically natural nutrition. So for example, he has a protein that is comprised of amaranth, which is a flower, and it's something that was used thousands and thousands of years ago, and somehow he kind of looked that up and found out like what are nutritional options from so long ago that it's just not even an option anymore. People don't use it, we're not ingesting those things anymore, and he created a protein off of it. And originally he just gave it to me at the academy, and he was like, hey, I want you to try this and give me feedback, and I've had a lot of people give me things over the years, and I've tried them and just not been a fan of it, or, whatever. And I just kind of like ended up throwing it in the trash. But he gave me a meal replacement, and I came home and tried it, and I was like, damn, this is actually really good. And I can drink it and still go home and eat a meal. And I don't feel like crap, which is usually not the case with most protein drinks or meal replacements. So I told him I loved it, and then he was like, well, I'm starting this protein supplement company, and I'd really like to work together in one capacity or the other. And I'm sure you guys have had good experiences with supplements and not so great experiences with supplements, being someone who's into lifting and martial arts and things like that. And I've always kind of wanted to work with a supplement company in one capacity or the other. But I've always been a little hesitant because usually the shit's not good. Or it's just cringy. Like the company's cringy. Anyways,
you don't like animal packs is what you're telling me?
Actually, dude, I actually took an animal pack right before we started. I take a lot of Animal Pack, like probably way too much. Like I think I take 20 pills a day that's just Animal Pack, and that's not my normal supplements. So Animal Pack's cool in my opinion. But anyways, he started talking to me about his company, and he was like, it'd be really cool to work together with like Rockwell, maybe even Balance Point. We have a meet on November 11th that he's sponsoring. And he just like really wants to be active in our endeavors. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's really rad. And so we're going to have it available at Rockwell pretty soon to be able to buy. He has, besides protein, he has an all-night sleep aid. He has an anti-anxiety supplement. He has a heart support, hair and skin support, which also acts as kind of like collagen. So for a lot of lifters, myself included, I take a ton of collagen. It has nothing to do with my hair or skin. It's just simply because of recovery, and it really does make me less sore the next day for all the activity that I partake in. So his website is www.eternalnutrition.com, and it's spelled EATERNAL. And you can order the products right off of the website, and you'll be seeing a lot of his supplements on the gym's Instagram, and then also for a lot of our meets down the road. So I just wanted to give him a shout out, and thank you for supporting the gym. Thank you for supporting Balance Point and the meet. And then also Eternal is essentially going to be like the sponsor for this podcast, which is really weird to say, but it's cool that we have one, and it's also cool that it's a friend of ours and a guy that we train with.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really look forward to having you guys on in the future, and just like I look forward to getting down some really weird rabbit holes, because I feel like this is just scratching the surface of what we could potentially get into. And thanks to you, Shara, for being here for all the tech stuff that I would definitely jack up if it was just on me. Like there would be no audio and there would be no video or no podcast, honestly. So, but yeah, thanks again for doing this. I look forward to doing a lot more of these down the road.
Sounds good.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.